First grade money-hungry minions and sixth grade quadrilateral quacks. An overview of elementary and secondary mathematical lessons using peer tutoring and graphic organizers as curriculum-based measurements by Kaylee Carmichael. Why choose peer tutoring? I chose peer tutoring as the CBM for this lesson because I have limited experience using peer tutoring as an instructional method, and I was hoping to learn more about its strengths and weaknesses in the classroom. The research emphasizes that peer tutoring can be an effective method of instruction that involves students demonstrating mastery of content by comprehensively teaching other students. Peer tutoring, when used appropriately, can increase the learning of academic skills and encourage more positive attitudes towards learning for both the tutor and the tutee. Furthermore, this instructional method empowers students and makes them feel valuable, which creates a more cooperative learning spirit in the educational setting. Elementary lesson measurement of money. Before conducting lesson 1, I gave a 5-question pretest to my group of 4 first grade pull-out math students. After analyzing their performance on this data, I knew that my work would be cut out for me. So during lesson 1, I provided my students with visual manipulative coins and modeled how to differentiate between the coins using the graphic organizer. We then played the matching game, where students had to make matches of the coin and its value. Finally, I modeled how to conduct the peer tutoring system, eliciting the assistance from another special education teacher. We showed students how to play the role of the tutor and the tutee, and how to properly record answers. I found that the peer tutoring method was difficult to assess because only half the students were able to master the concepts. With only 4 students, even at their various levels of understanding of the skill, it was manageable to monitor their individual progress and determine their understanding of the material. Furthermore, students were very engaged during the matching activity. I decided that for lesson 2, I may need to provide further instructions and extra support to individual students that were struggling before they pair up for the peer tutoring method. In addition, I decided that I need to find some way to engage all of the students using songs, as majority of the students stated that music was their favorite subject of the school day. For lesson 2, I quickly reviewed the concepts from lesson 1, and we got right into the games. In this lesson, students listened to a collection of songs that teach about measurement of money. Students also played money bingo. Who knew that first graders could be so competitive? After lesson 2, I realized that I should have better prepared for the various levels of students mastering the skill. Student C had trouble moving on from determining the value of pennies and nickels totaling 10 cents or less to determining the value of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters equivalent to 100 cents or less, because she struggled to determine the value of quarters, dimes, and nickels. However, her partner, student A, was ready to determine the value of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters equivalent to $2. If I had more time with these students, I would go back and review the value of common coins in a one-on-one setting with student C and provide student A a more challenging problem. I may consider reevaluating my pairs of students and possibly bringing in a student that is grasping the concept on the same level as student A. Thus, I can work with student C individually until she has mastered the basic knowledge of coin value and reintroduce her to a peer that may be more suited for her achievement level and needs. I also realized that compared to the peer tutoring computer program in lesson 1, this week's lesson seemed to be a bit more difficult for the students and seemed to take longer. Some students were more engaged than others and were more helpful to their partner when acting as the tutor role. Some students were just observing their partner and would not necessarily provide helpful corrective feedback if a mistake was made. This made it more difficult for me to monitor each student's progress because I had to prompt students to assist each other more frequently. I decided that I was going to have to adapt my lesson plans for lesson 3. During instruction for lesson 3, I had the students build on their previous knowledge and determine the value of a collection of coins whose total is 100 cents or less, as many of them were not yet ready to move on to more advanced skills. The students also receive instruction on correctly using the cent symbol, dollar sign, and decimal point, although they had been exposed to most of these symbols throughout the lesson. The students completed a word problem activity and took a virtual tour that guided them through an informational roller coaster of coins in the interactive digital activity. In the peer tutoring portion of Lesson 3, I emphasized the importance of assisting one another while conducting the peer tutoring sessions. I showed students what to do when the person acting as the tutee makes an error, and the person acting as the tutor has to correct the error. This clarified the roles and responsibilities of tutor and tutee to the students. At the end of Lesson 3, a post-test was given. Overall, I think this lesson's objective was met, and students completed the activities feeling successful and grasping a new skill related to the measurement of money. I think that many of the students were happy to see improvement in their knowledge and understanding of the content in Lesson 3. If I had conducted my originally planned lesson in which students had to determine the collective amount of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters of 200 cents or less, I think that the students would have struggled. Thus, I would see a decrease in motivation and attention to task among the 4 students. So, analyzing the data, all 4 students made significant progress and appropriately demonstrated their knowledge of the content. There was much room for improvement throughout the unit plan, yet in self-reflection, I feel that I've grown as a teacher from implementing and adjusting this lesson. This lesson has served as a great learning opportunity in which I will use to develop my skills as a teacher. So was peer tutoring successful as a CBM? I learned that the chosen CBM may not have been the most appropriate for the group of students that I was working with. One major benefit of using this CBM was the ability to collect and monitor the students' progress and analyze data to make adjustments or modifications to my lesson plans. However, in using this CBM, I'm not sure if I received an accurate account of the students' ability to understand and demonstrate the measurement skill. Upon administering the first CBM, I modeled the appropriate way to conduct a peer tutoring session, eliciting the help of the student's special education teacher. I was under the impression that modeling this activity would clearly explain my expectations for how students should conduct themselves. In observing the students interact during the peer tutoring activities, I found that they were unsure of how to assist each other due to not having a complete grasp of the content. Furthermore, the first graders that I worked with may not have been old or mature enough to work in pairs without a teacher actively instructing their next step. For example, I found myself having to assist each student throughout the CBM in order to make sure that they understood questions correctly and could apply their knowledge to the content. What I should have done was spent more time reviewing the content and made sure everyone understood the questions before I even administered the CBM. While keeping this in mind from my lesson plans in the secondary education unit, I decided to use graphic organizers as my CBM in order to measure the benefit that graphic organizers have on or in the classroom. Secondary lesson, why choose graphic organizers? I've observed graphic organizers being an effective method of instruction that is often used in reading and writing to indicate relationships between verbal elements such as words, phrases, and sentences. However, I was curious if the use of graphic organizers could also be expanded and modified to apply to mathematics content in order to help students understand concepts and relationships that involve mathematical symbols, expressions, and equations. I decided that I would use graphic organizers as my CBM to measure student progress in mathematics. I found that graphic organizers are a successful tool for all students to organize and clarify thoughts, infer solutions to problems, and communicate thinking strategies in mathematics contents for secondary education. Lesson 1. Before conducting Lesson 1, I administered the 10-question quadrilateral sort CBM as a pretest to students to evaluate their prior knowledge of quadrilaterals. The CBM was in the form of a handout consisting of geometric shapes, and students identified the geometric figure using the proper classification. I found that I'm going to have a lot of work cut out for me. The students completed the quadrilateral warm-up in whole class discussion as I guided them through the process of correctly answering the problems. Next, as a class, we traced the geometric shape, reviewed the characteristics, then identified and classified the quadrilateral using the graphic organizer for Lesson 1. Students then worked in pairs to classify quadrilaterals using a computer activity that measures their knowledge of the content that was reviewed. Students showed enthusiasm and seemed to enjoy using the quadrilateral manipulatives. Many of them wanted to construct objects using these block-like quadrilateral figures. Overall, they were able to have fun while learning about quadrilaterals. With 6 students at their various levels of understanding of the skill, it was very difficult to monitor their individual progress and determine their understanding of the material. Students seemed to enjoy working with a partner more than working independently. Furthermore, they were more engaged and performed better on the activities in which they worked in pairs or small groups. Although the students were engaged when completing the graphic organizers and they referred back to their graphic organizers quite often, some students seemed to dislike filling in the graphic organizers and would prefer to be given a copy of a completed graphic organizer to use. So I decided that in Lesson 2, I would find some way to engage the students using songs and games as to get them more active in the lesson. I decided that I would also incorporate more group work since this seems to motivate the students. In Lesson 2, students completed the warm-up activity, listened to the parody of Radioactive by Imagine Dragons that classifies quadrilaterals, completed a fill-in-the-blank quadrilateral, and played bingo to practice classifying or naming quadrilaterals. I found that in Lesson 2, it became more difficult to check the students' work and record errors as they were completing the graphic organizer in pairs. It became clear that students are forgetting that geometric figures can have multiple names. For instance, a square can also be known as a rectangle. I decided that I needed to provide more in-depth instruction on how quadrilaterals relate to each other and differ in properties. And here's an image of a graphic organizer that was used in this lesson. In Lesson 3, the teacher and the students reviewed the final graphic organizer for the unit. The students then read the roots of a square story and completed the family tree for quadrilaterals. They worked independently on this assignment and they used their graphic organizers and assistance from the teacher for support. The students then completed the Venn diagram activity to show the relationships in the quadrilateral family. Here are some images of the graphic organizer, the roots of a square and Venn diagram activity, an independent practice activity that were used for Lesson 3, along with the quadrilateral manipulatives that were also used throughout the unit. For the poster activity, the students formed into groups of 3, and each group was assigned to research 3 quadrilaterals. Students identified the quadrilateral in real-life situations or by drawing or using magazines and newspapers, and cut out pictures to make group posters in order to display examples of quadrilaterals in real-life context. They did an excellent job of using their graphic organizers and were very creative in coming up with the final product. In Lesson 3, these students seem more confident when classifying quadrilaterals and learn the features or characteristics of many of these geometric figures. Students were began to teach each other and remind each other of the properties of quadrilaterals. They seemed excited to use the appropriate math vocabulary. I think that many of the students were happy to see their improvement in their knowledge and understanding of the content. In Lesson 3, students were much more helpful to each other and they were eager to demonstrate their knowledge. Students also were very receptive to the quadrilateral poster project and enjoyed sharing their poster in front of their peers. So, analyzing the data. I was pleased with the results of this unit. All 6 of the students made significant progress and appropriately demonstrated their knowledge of the content. One thing that I found interesting in the assessments is that 2 students decreased in score from the pretest to the Lesson 1 assessment. This alerted me to make the instructional decision to modify Lessons 1 and 2, as to spend more time on identifying and classifying quadrilaterals. I'm pleased that I chose to adapt my instructional plans because each student made improvements and 5 out of 6 students answered the 10 questions with 80% accuracy or higher on the post-test. So was the use of graphic organizers successful as a CBM? In analyzing the CBM results, I came to a final conclusion that implementing graphic organizers was successful for this group of 6th graders. Based on behavioral observations, it was evident the majority of the students were highly engaged throughout the activities in each lesson, and in turn were successful in learning a new skill. Students were successful in expanding their previous knowledge of mathematical vocabulary and were able to apply their knowledge to real-world applications. In conducting this lesson, I've taken with me what I have learned, and I'll apply my knowledge to future opportunities to utilize these curriculum-based measurements. If I incorporate the use of graphic organizers and peer tutoring systems into the classroom, I'll be able to meet the unique needs of each student of my class. Thank you for viewing this PowerPoint presentation.